good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be joining us from again. We are now on episode 36, Jason, of Industry Insights 36. We are sneaking up on the 1 year anniversary. I'll say sneaking, we'll get to more of that later. But speaking of sneaking up, we've got a fair amount of research we've covered, a fair amount of research we're going to unpack. So a quick tease before we get to our now world map that's become an institution thanks to our producers. And so, Jason, last month, January, and I can't believe we're already saying it's another month, meaning it's February in 2021, which is exactly like 2020, but just more
angrier.
So. And yeah, it's 2020 with a few more teeth. So last month, Jason, we unpacked the entire month of January, encouraged people to go check it out if you're interested. What we believe is the industry's largest data protection research ever in the history of the industry, not just recently.
Yep.
But this time out February, take people through what we're thinking of for a multi-part series this month.
Yeah, so with the data protection trends research that we did last month, we covered a large series of topics. What's going on with COVID? What are you doing on-prem? What are you doing in the cloud? A lot of different things, right? And so one of those areas that we covered was what is your cloud-based production and protection strategy? And we could only get like 6 or 7 questions in the DPR report on that. So based on the success we had with DPR last year, not only did we expand into a bigger data protection research project for 21, we also went and did a separate project specifically on what does production in the cloud look like in 2021. And so this is going to be the first of 4 parts digging into that data. By my count, it makes it either the 3rd or the 4th largest research project around this type of category. 1,550 IT decision makers across 10 different countries, commercial and enterprise accounts. And so we've got a 4-parter that we're going to be looking first at production hosted infrastructure, right? IaaS. We're going to look at who's protecting that infrastructure next week. 3rd week is going to be disaster recovery leveraging cloud-hosted infrastructure. And then we're going to finish off the series with cloud native and looking at the personas and the methodologies for protecting SaaS and PaaS-based workloads. So it'll be another fun 4-part series, this time really looking at what does cloudy really mean.
Yeah, and what I love about this, Jason, I mean, to your point, in fact, we were chatting about this earlier, that of the now 4 largest global surveys ever done in the space, meaning backup and recovery, Veeam now in the last, I'll call it 15 months roughly, has 3 of the top 4, and we're not slowing down, which means sort of a tease ahead. We've got great fodder, multiple other research projects in flight as well that we can riff on. But what's fun about this is obviously you and I have opinions collectively now 62-ish years in the industry, but we have global data points to draw from. And why we say globe, Jason, that means we should definitely take a look at the Veeam Global Map.
Let's do it.
As we look to bring that up, if you haven't seen this before, give a shout out in the comments, please, where you're tuning in from. And also, of course, any questions or comments that you may have, but love to hear a shout out. So, Jason, we always love it when we've got Russia and especially Canada, because it just covers up so much of the real estate, right?
The world is turning green, baby. Love that. And then
Great
what else we got?
presence.
So, also my favorite Meteors in South Africa. You can almost always count on South Africa joining.
Right.
So I love that. What do we got? In India, Turkey, India, Dubai.
Yep, United Emirates.
Okay. Look down the south. Okay, so Argentina, that one's always easy to pick out. Can we get a closer look on Europe? Let's see. What do we got? Is that Sweden, maybe? Okay. Yep. Italy's in the house. All right.
Ukraine, Czech Republic.
There you go. Ukraine.
Italy, of course, but we may have mentioned that.
Israel. I think I see them in there as well. Very nice. Very nice. Fantastic. But now this is great. The rest of the world is all following what's going on with, Mexico just got lit up. So thank you for that. But it looks like the only U.S. states so far are Texas, where I'm at, Colorado, where you're at, and Georgia, where our producer is. There's like 47 other places that we got to get lit up green this morning. So, all right, we got to work on that.
Awesome. Let's tee up our first slide. And I like how, Jason, you've been framing this, meaning, obviously all of these different research activities are connected. There's connective tissue. The DPR just means data protection report. Veeam's been issuing something like that under a similar name or exact name for a few years now. From the most recent data protection report that we parsed through, we've talked through this, but let's use this foundationally, Jason, for our chat today on cloud in particular. One thing I like to point out is that with these series of bars that you see, what's important to understand is each of the four groupings are a relation of two different years of questioning. And what I mean by that is if you parse through the legend below at the bottom, on the left-hand side, we asked in 2021 what they're actually doing. Then second from the right, meaning that kind of lighter yellow color, would be their 2-year plan as it relates to when we asked them last year, 2020. Then you go to the next series of every other bars. Second from the left would be 2021 actual, and then furthest to the right would be the same notion of what do you think 2 years into the future. So here we've got an N of over 1,800 global, I think 28 countries, right? What are your plans directionally as it relates to physical servers, virtual machines, and hosted machines with the hyperscaler? And Jason, I don't want to steal your thunder. Right on the left side, physical, you've got a great comment about how people are running relative to their plans.
Yeah, one of the coolest things you should learn over time with data is it's not always about the statistical numbers, because that's like a snapshot, right? And we all know that a video tells a better story than a picture. And in this case, what you're seeing is it's the shape of the data that's really interesting. So looking at the physical servers, the 4 blocks on the left, remember you're looking in pairs. From the leftmost, in 2020, they thought they were going to be at, and let me just get my screen a little bigger. Oh, thank you, Mark. They thought they're going to be at 38% of their infrastructure was going to be physical. And then hop over one, they thought it was going to go down to 29% over 2 years. Then we checked in a year later. How you doing? And they said, we're at 29% now. They thought what they were going to accomplish in 2 years, they did in 1. And I'm going to blame COVID for that, right? So we're going to blame the hyper-acceleration towards the cloud when you couldn't walk in the data center. So they're at 29%, and their intent over 2 years is to go down to 24. So the idea is the intent of the data, the shape says we plan on gradually deprecating the amount of physical infrastructure within our data center. Next 2 sets of bars, again, looking in pairs, they think the percentage of their infrastructure is going to be virtualized stays flat. They thought it was 30, going to stay 30. The next year down, no, they're at 23, but they think they're going to stay at 24. They think the virtual stuff stays flat. And then the net sum gain is what you see on the right, which is they thought they were at 32 going towards 41. No, they're at 47 and they're aiming towards 52. And that last one, that's a really interesting nugget, because if you're at 47 and you're going to 52, that's the tipping point, right? That's when the presumption is over half of your production infrastructure is going to be cloud hosted. That's from the data protection report. Now let's spend some time looking at the new data. 1,550 IT decision makers all using cloud infrastructure. Let's double click into that right side and see what does a cloudy production infrastructure really look like.
And I'll just fess up right off the bat, Jason. I was a little surprised by these results, meaning pleasantly surprised that organizations are further along on their adoption rate, especially as it relates to higher priority, greater production activity. If we replay somewhat recent history of VMware in the 2000, I'll call it 7-ish timeframe, big effort to try to get out of back office and development and into production. And that took multiple years to fully achieve. But here what we see on the left-hand side, it's pretty amazing. Now, the left-hand question, development non-production, fairly well represented, which is exactly what we would have expected. And I think to your point, pandemic, resulting macroeconomic concerns, et cetera, perhaps skills staffing, led to an acceleration on things in the middle there, meaning normal production workloads, high priority workloads, but especially high priority production workloads in the cloud. Did that surprise you, or was that just me?
No, that did surprise me. And I think honestly there were two things that surprised me. One, you joked earlier, each of us have right around 31 years in this business. And if you talk to most of the folks that are 3 decades in IT, there's still a lot of folks out there that authentically were saying, well, yeah, you might spin it up in the cloud and try it out, but then you're going to bring it on-prem when it's going to be in production. And that's not what the data shows, right? So if you're looking on that chart on the left-hand side, yeah, about a third of organizations say they're spinning up workloads for dev, and it's not just for production use. But the fact that half of organizations said they have production workloads in the cloud, and probably even more interesting to me, take a look at those two bars, the center two bars on the left-hand side. The difference between normal production workloads running in the cloud and high priority running in the cloud, that to me shows you just how mainstream cloud is. Because you roll the clock back 12 years, think about when virtualization was first coming out. People would say, well, you could put a file server in a VM, but you'd never run Oracle in a VM. You'd never run Exchange in a VM. You'd never run those mission criticals. And yeah, you do. And the fact that there's almost no difference here basically shows me cloud is absolutely mainstream. And that's backed up on the right-hand side. Look, the high percentage of folks that said they have been in production with cloud hosted workloads for 2 years or almost 2 years is more than half of the 1,500 environments that we surveyed. So yeah, the cloud this is not a fad. We are not going back to brick and mortar.
No, we're not. And of course, we should want to be careful. We don't want to suggest that the data center is going to zero, that people are going to shut down things. I think this is a combination statement of where your refresh dollar is going to go and where is your new money or new bets going to be placed. And what I like about these kinds of surveys is, directionally it'd be pretty easy to make a bet. Hey, I bet it's going to go more towards cloud. Yeah. What's interesting about this is showing the use case type and then the acceleration. Honestly, if anything surprised me in the other direction would be, I would have expected disaster recovery as a service, DR to cloud, being higher than what was represented there.
Yeah, and in fact, honestly, I think the only thing that's holding back DR to the cloud is when you think about the maturation of the orchestration tools necessary to do real DR. Depending on what IaaS infrastructure you're using, you don't get as good of access to it, right? So as an example, we like everything VMware, right? But running VMware on Amazon looks different than running VMware in Azure, looks different than running VMware on IBM Cloud, looks different than running VMware on-prem. And so depending on how low layer you can get into the hypervisor really dictates or limits your ability to orchestrate. And orchestration absolutely is the key to disaster recovery. So I think the reason we don't see as much DR there is because in some cases, IaaS has precluded us from getting low enough in the stack to do the same kind of elegant orchestration that we're used to from self-managed data centers overall. Yeah,
good point. And while we're readying the global map to pop up, I want to give two commercials. One of it is we're talking about cloud. We can't say what it is, but in the next day or two, we're going to have a cloud announcement of a brand new Veeam Cloud capability. In fact, it's a brand new product. It's coming out very, very shortly. So a little teaser for that.
Speaking of, we're not allowed to talk about the Veeam backup for, excuse me. Sorry.
That's right. We're not. Not yet, but soon.
Can't mention that.
Soon. All we can say that it's coming really, really soon. It's a new product, and look at a marketplace of some kind near you. However, speaking of teases, Jason, version 10 and everything in 2020, greatest release cadence in Veeam history, depending on how you want to count, 15 to 19 different new releases and or new products and major updates. Version 11, though, if you're a Spinal Tap fan, and clearly I kind of am, we want to take it to 11 this year because, as Jason's pointed out, it's already been a year. So let's release a lot more code just to try to make it a little better. Version 11, we've got a sneak launch event coming up roughly 3 weeks from now, Jason, February 24th. I'm looking at the calendar. That's a Wednesday. I'm still from IBM decades ago, where you could only announce on a Tuesday and you could only generally issue your product on a Friday. So the fact that we do something on a Wednesday is mind-boggling to me. Didn't know that could happen.
Hey, can we move our live stream to Wednesday? Because I totally want to do that. Because otherwise, on Monday the 22nd, I'm going to totally pre-release anything that they're not watching. I want to be part of that. Dang it! All right.
We should definitely.
You want to? Do we have? Are we ready for the map, or you want to kind of dig more into what's next?
Yeah, let's see where we're at. Last count I had was, I think we're nearing 20 countries. It's either 18 or 19. So we're getting some more things going on, more coverage. A lot of APJ, Jason, recently, interesting, and it's always amazing. Really appreciate. I mean, these are people that are tuning in dramatically different time zones, as well as the replay. So we really appreciate your continued interest, and do want to remind people, feel free to throw in some comments, questions if you do have them. If we can't get to them live, we are serious about trying to follow up with you after the fact. Nice Middle East view there.
Nice. What do we got?
Oh, there's the APJ.
APJ, thank you for that. So we got Malaysia, been there a couple times. Let's see, what do we got over in? Here's the rest of Europe. Very good. Yeah. So Romania, is that right? Austria in the house. Greece. It's been a while since we had some folks from Greece in, so thank you for joining. And what about on the in the New World? There we go. A couple more states Midwest chimed in. Ohio. Yeah. Howdy, Ohio. Michigan. Awesome. And Indiana.
The great state, yes.
Sweet.
So let's double click on our results, Jason. Hybrid cloud workloads, and what in the last, say, year, where have they been coming? What has been the contributing source to that?
Yeah, you mentioned earlier how let's make sure that we are not saying the data center is dead, the data center is dead. That is nowhere. It's exactly as accurate as tape is dead, which it ain't, right? And in fact, I think it's the chart on the left is probably my favorite chart in the IaaS infrastructure. So please, everyone who's multitasking and checking email, take a screenshot or look at that left-hand side, because the survey, the independent research firm, they went and asked, when you put a workload up in a cloud, where did it come from? And the answer is only 62% of the workloads that spun up last year were migrated from a data center. Right, the 30% came. There used to be physical boxes, so get rid of those old pizza boxes out there. 32% came from VMs. Okay, that's part of that IT modernization curve. 38%, the largest percentage of new workloads that spun up, were exactly that. They were new workloads. So when we think about it in the context of that first chart, we saw that declination of physical and then the flat of virtual. That's not because those are eroding. It's because they're being diluted. Right? As the number of workloads across an IT enterprise expands, what you see on that left-hand side is physical and virtual. They're not eroding. They're just being diluted by the fact that new workloads, wherever it makes sense, are being spun up cloud first. And I think that's really interesting because that tells you hybrid is here to stay. Yeah, and I think it's interesting too on the right-hand side, supporting that notion, we're going to continually, perpetually be in a hybrid model. Yeah. If you look at the rightmost side, roughly 60% said, no, we have not brought back on-prem. We have not rehosted workloads back into the data center. And I think the three bars over on, or actually the two most left ones at 23% each, kind of substantiate why that might be. One, because almost a quarter said that they've developed for the cloud. It was already a cloud native notion. They were going down this path for some time. Another quarter said, no, we're migrating to the cloud, and only 7% said they did pull things back. And what's curious about that to me, Jason, is we hear a lot about people repatriating workloads. And I think the reality is that only 7%, how do you rationalize? Well, it seems like we hear about that. Well, I think it's because it's more the exception, at least at this point. And so therefore it gets a little more attention than it statistically might warrant. Yeah, and for the mathematicians that are on, I already got one private chat on this one already. Why don't these numbers add up to 100%? Okay, so the reason they don't add up to 100% is you could either the original question said, have you brought anything back, yes or no? If you said no, that's 58% of organizations. 42%, the reverse of that, said yes, we have brought workloads back from the cloud. And then the follow-up to that said, okay, so if you did, what was the rationale? And so of the 42% of organizations that said that they brought it back, they chose at least one of these yes scenarios. Either they brought it back because they already were doing it for dev and then spun it up on production, or they did it, they had remorse, which is that middle column, or they did it for DR. And I like all three of those. I like the fact that and if you soft math, 23%, 1 in 4 organizations spun up a production workload first in the cloud as dev, with the intent of always bringing that on-prem for full production use. 1 out of 4 organizations do that. Next column over, 1 out of 4 had some remorse, right? They said, hey, maybe it doesn't run exactly what it was. So maybe it's performance, maybe it was cost, predictability of cost. I don't know. New CIO, CISO maybe. But 1 in 4 brought it back. So that's the remorse category. It's only 1 in 4 organizations. And actually the 7%, I spun it up in DR and then brought it back on-prem. I think that, again, goes back to the maturity of DR to the cloud. But I love that only from the perspective of if you have a flat tire on the side of the road and you've got that baby little donut in your trunk, right? You're not going to run on that forever. You're going to run on that because you got stuck on the side of the highway. You're going to go get the real tire fix, and then you're going to put it back again. That's what that 7% is saying is, yes, I limped along in a cloud. I got running again, and then I put my full-size tire back on, and I'm back running in production. So I'm okay with exactly how that is. That's the little donut coming home. So.
Yep. And see, we've got a question or feedback from Mark. It says, I wondered in the cloud data if customers are only thinking of public or also private. He gives some examples of what private could be and also ability to do bare metal services. And I'll offer a thought, Jason, you jump in as well.
Sure.
So it is a mix. It is a mix to be sure. You know, we've often said the cloud is not a thing or a provider and implementation and delivery model or consumption method for that matter, but it is a mix. However, if I had to say what side is it overweighted towards, at least at present, it is a bit overweighted towards public cloud to make a generalization. However, I would say from a BAS-DRAS perspective, that's where I would say private and managed service providers would definitely enter the fray.
Yeah, I'll pile on in that. Island is a fantastic example. I'm a fan of what they do. I haven't actually worked with any OROC customers by name. I do know some Equinix customers. Those kinds of architectures will use Island just because I'm the most familiar with of the 3 of them that the question listed. Almost breaks the rules. It's a you can have your cake and eat it too model. You know, so most of the time this survey is surveying people that were running private infrastructure on-prem, and they're thinking about the cloud as somebody else's thing. When you look at something like an island architecture, it gets a little bit blurry because sometimes you're running your production over there, but it has so well integrated, it feels like it's still yours. You just happen to not be paying for the humans per hour and the real estate per square foot, right? So that is such an extension. I would almost treat that island architecture as if it's an extension of your on-prem. And then cloud is still that other thing, like a hyperscale out on the other side. So it does kind of blur those lines a little bit, which is a little unfair for that. We actually do have, to your point, you mentioned earlier, we've got more research coming. We have an entire additional project coming out, research project in second quarter around what are customers looking for in data protection as a service. So BAS and DRAS, and that includes some of those more niche scenarios like, what if your metal ain't actually your metal? Mm-hmm. Where does the BC and the DR come from for that? And so that'll be fun to look at right now. We haven't even seen the data for that. It's out in the field. So, but great question, Mark. Please keep bringing them in.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, as we double click now on the current survey, when we ask people what is their sort of decision-making framework around what workloads should run into the cloud, we got some interesting results and some, I guess what I would say, surprising, some not so surprising, meaning cost, of course, is always going to play a role. So the way to parse this is choose all, that's the darker green. Choose the single one or primary determinant, that's that kind of lighter green or nearing yellow. Cost bubbles to the top, not surprising. Cost is always important, but especially in any kind of macroeconomic concern, so no surprise there. Security is fascinating to me, Jason, because for at least a decade, the thought has been, well, you can't go to the cloud because of security reasons. So people do check that to be sure. It's the second highest in aggregate. But if you could only choose one, look at the percentage difference. I mean, it drops down dramatically compared to cost. And then things like compliance at number 3, and we've got a two-way tie for number 4 of ease of management and then scale, which is ironic because supposedly the cloud's elastic, but that comes in, near seconds compared to everything else. So did anything surprise you on this? And I'll just jump out and let's take cost out of the equation for cloud. Compliance I found to be fascinating. What are your thoughts?
So I do like the fact that you really have 3 very discrete, let's call them bands of considerations. The first band is economics, right up the gate. I like the fact that security and compliance are adjacent to each other in the list, right? Because I think of those as more of the as the operational, the curation kind of concept. And then the latter 3 really kind of all lean in towards experience. The ease of management is the IT pro's experience. The bottom one is the user's experience. But you get those 3 bands. By the way, super, super important clarifier on this question. This is not saying the cloud is cheaper, the cloud is more secure, the cloud is more compliant, the cloud is easier to manage. This is not what it's saying.
Right.
The question was, what are the determinants? So economics was the top one. It means either, hey, we can run this cheaper in the cloud, or way, it's going to be a lot more expensive in the cloud. Either way, economics was the driver to the decision, not a comparative on-prem versus cloud. Same thing. Security was a determinant to the decision, not the cloud is more secure or less secure. It's just that those were the things on the scorecards of these 850 IT professionals. This was the scorecard they used to decide whether or not it went back. The only other thing which to me was kind of surprising, cost is always top of mind. If you're talking about cloud, you're going to talk about security. I thought it was really funny. I was amused by how low user access came in, because I admit, I thought with a distributed workforce, everybody's working from home. Why would you tunnel everyone through a VPN? Let's just get the servers out of the data center, stand them up in the cloud, and that way everybody has better access to them. I would have thought user accessibility or user experience would have been higher on the list. And turns out IT pros don't care, right? Well, maybe they care. They care 1 out of 4 environments. They don't care 3 out of 4 organizations, 26%. But it's only the driving factor in 1 out of 20 scenarios. And I think that's funny.
And really quickly, like in seconds, let's hit the last slide, just because it has directly relates to what you were talking about, Jason. So here, on the one hand, we asked what are the benefits of the cloud. On the left, on the right, we asked what are the challenges. And notice how you've got some overlaps, meaning people reported the same thing as both being beneficial and or being challenging. But to your point, what we do see is basically implementing cloud capabilities to better appease your end users was not really high on the list. In fact, it was concerns about how it actually related to data center professional challenges. And we see sort of this bifurcated notion about what that experience really, really was. So we'll pause on that for a moment, and obviously you can take a screenshot of that. We should begin to wrap up and just hit the world map again. Jason, maybe take us through, I don't even know how many countries we're at, but we've got to be at least 20.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I see Turkey's in the house. Got some new ones. Hey, Florida showed up. Always awesome to see them. Germany's in. Who's that now in the southeast United States? South Carolina, maybe?
Yep.
Switzerland's in the house. Oh, wow, Serbia's in. Here's what I'm not even sure I know how to pronounce this.
Eritrea, yeah.
Eritrea.
Which is brand new.
I've seen them in our list before. That's awesome.
Right? So with that, I think we're probably at 24, 25-ish. Let's call it 24 and change.
Yeah.
So which is outstanding. And Jason, for the next couple of weeks here, we kind of mentioned at the outset, this is going to be a first part in the February month-long series. But what should we expect on next Mondays?
Yeah, so this week we looked at running production in the cloud. Next week, we're going to look at how are people backing that up. Right. And then just like we talked about at Veeam, once you solve for backup, now you look at DR. DR is week 3. And then for some people, the way they've chosen to do DR is by doing resilient applications. That looks like SaaS, and that's going to be week 4 is how does that work out. But for next week, we're going to look at, now that we understand what a production cloud looks like, let's talk about who's backing it up and why. that'll be 167 hours from now.
Awesome. Well, check out the version 11, February 24th link down there below when we announce V11 and the details. Sneak peek in the next couple of days, you're going to see a new cloud product issued from Veeam. And until we get together again, thank you so much for tuning in. Stay safe, stay positive, and we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.